From stories across the world to stories here at home, this is the National News Broadcast. A very good evening to you. I'm Nitya Sarat Chandra.
And I'm Tarak Etiarachi. First, a look at the stories making the headlines this evening.
The government has decided to limit island-wide curfew to the night time only, with effect from Tuesday, the 26th of May. Movements between districts will be permitted, except in the Colombo and Gampaha districts. The Indian Premier commends the steps taken by the President of Sri Lanka on controlling the coronavirus. A presidential task force to be appointed regarding the conservation of archaeological sites. The Consumer Affairs Authority inspects large-scale rice mills. Stocks of Nadu and Samba released to the market in large quantities. COVID-19 claims 20,000 lives in Brazil.
Now, your top story this evening, the government has decided to limit curfew in place in the Colombo and Gampaha districts to nighttime only, with effect from Tuesday, the 26th of May. Thereby, curfew will be effective island-wide, including in the Colombo and Gampaha districts from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. until further notice. The President of his state's movements between districts will be permitted with effect from the 26th of May, except in the Colombo and Gampaha districts. Meanwhile, island-wide curfew will be in place tomorrow and on Monday, the 25th. With the detection of COVID-19 patients, curfew was initially imposed on the 18th of March in the Putlam district and the Negombo and Kochikade police divisions, and the following day steps were taken to impose curfew in the Wattala and Jayala police divisions from 10 p.m. The government announced island-wide curfew on the 20th of March. The curfew was in place from 6 p.m. on the 20th to 6 a.m. on the 24th of March. Under the imposed quarantine curfew, movements between districts was prohibited from the 23rd of March. The Western Province and Putlam district were declared high-risk areas due to the rapid spread of the coronavirus. As higher numbers of COVID-19 infected patients were reported from the Jaffna and Kandy districts, curfew was extended in these districts from the 28th of March until further notice. In addition, curfew was imposed on the 9th of April in the Ratnapura and Palmadula police divisions until further notice, as several COVID-19 patients were detected in these areas. The Akurana, Beruwala, Pannila and China Fort areas that were placed in isolation were taken out of lockdown on the 3rd of May. The process of restoring economic activities and day-to-day public life activities whilst curfew was in place commenced on the 11th of May. Thereafter, from the 18th of this month, except for the Colombo and Gampaha districts, curfew in place in other districts of the island was enforced from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Curfew imposed at 8 p.m. today will be lifted at 5 a.m. on Tuesday. Thereafter, curfew will be in place island-wide from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m.
In the Sri Lanka, leaders have agreed on further enhancing all forms of relations between the two countries in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. These sentiments were exchanged during a telephone conversation between President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi this morning. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in the telephone call expressed his pleasure regarding the opportunity received to exchange views on subjects of mutual importance and express his gratitude to the Indian Prime Minister and the people of India for the support extended to Sri Lanka at this present crisis situation. The President emphasized that the 10 tons of medical aid donated by India were extremely beneficial. President Rajapaksa stated that he is confident that India will properly control the COVID-19 epidemic and commended the efforts taken by the Indian Premier in this regard, as well as the economic benefits introduced especially for the underprivileged persons. The President pointed out that Sri Lanka has been able to satisfactorily control the spread of the disease. In response, Indian Premier Narendra Modi stated managing a population of 1.3 billion persons is a difficult task. However, around 75% of the spread of the disease has been controlled. In the conversation, the Indian Premier stated that he identified President Gotabaya Rajapaksa as a leader with a clear mind and the ability to take speedy decisions in crisis situations. The Indian Premier further stated, according to the information available to him, he has observed that Sri Lanka has been able to control the epidemic at a satisfactory level, and the credit can be attributed to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The president stated now his focus is on economic restoration and he anticipates support from media to revive several mainstream projects. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa explained accelerating construction work of the Colombo Port East Terminal and the promotion of value-added industrial and agricultural products are amongst these objectives. The president further explained that if businessmen in India and Indian companies that are already operating in Sri Lanka can be encouraged to invest in these fields, it will be a boost to the economic restoration in the post-corona period. The president also proposed to further expand the financial facilities exchange program that is underway between the two countries. The president pointed out if the Indian government is agreeable on adding a sum of $1.1 billion to the $400 million granted under the SAARC exchange facility, it will be a great support in the management of foreign exchange issues. In response, Indian Premier Narendra Modi said that he is personally dedicated to assist Sri Lanka under conditions advantageous to Sri Lanka. Premier Modi requested President Rajapaksa to appoint a suitable representative to work with the Indian High Commission on this regard. The two leaders expressed agreement on taking forward projects launched on bilateral partnerships which directly benefits the public and projects prioritized on health and food security.
Now, Muslims in Sri Lanka will celebrate Eid al-Fitr Ramzan Festival tomorrow. As the new moon has been sighted, the Colombo Grand Mosque announced the sighting of the new moon a short while ago. Now, in the meantime, on to more local stories. The Consumer Affairs Authority states that rice mill owners who have stocks of Nadu and Samba rice in storage should release their stocks to the market. Inspections were carried out at large-scale rice mills in the Polonnaruwa district today. The inspections were carried out by a team led by the chairman of the Consumer Affairs Authority, retired Major General Shanta Disanaika. The rice mill owners were requested to increase the production capacity of Nadu and Samba stocks and have them released to the market. Chairman of the Consumer Affairs Authority, retired Major General Shanta Disanaika, requests rice mill owners, if stocks of paddy have been stored unnecessarily, to process these paddy stocks into rice and release them into the market. He stated that he had visited a number of mainstream rice mills and had discussed the situation. He observed that certain conditions had been put forward when issuing rice, such as selling a quantity of Nadu rice and purchasing a quantity of Kiri Samba. After the matter was discussed, it was agreed to release stocks of rice to traders without conditions. The government states that there will be absolutely no shortage of rice in the country. Secretary to the Ministry of Internal Trade, Food Security and Consumer Welfare, Bhadrani Jawardena, states that several measures have been implemented with effect from today. Sufficient stocks of paddy have been stored as farmers reaped a bountiful paddy harvest in the Mahakultivation season. Currently, the country has around 3 million metric tons of rice in storage. Secretary to the Ministry of Internal Trade, Food Security and Consumer Welfare, Bhadrani Jawardena, states the distribution of rice will be underway continuously in the Kalatra and Gampa districts tomorrow and the day after, whilst measures will be continuously underway in other areas as well. The Ministry Secretary explained rice stocks are being delivered to cooperatives. With effect from Tuesday, measures will be in place to deliver rice to Satasa outlets and also to the private sector trade outlets.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa says a presidential task force chaired by the Defence Secretary will be appointed to systematically survey and conserve archaeological sites of the eastern province. The President announced this move when the Advisory Council on Buddhist Religious Affairs convened for the second time yesterday. Various concerned parties have put forward points pertaining to the destruction of archaeological sites. At the discussion, it was stated that an extensive plan on conserving sites of historical importance will be put in place with the support of the Department of Archaeology. The Mahasangha educated the President at length on the need for a Sasana dialogue, as certain actions taken by certain bhikkhus can be observed as in contravention of the Tripitaka and Buddhism. The President responded, stated that if actions to be taken on this regard and proposals are put forward, he will implement the necessary rectifications within his tenure. The Mahasangha commended the efforts taken by the President to protect the people at a moment when all countries are collapsing due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The President pointed out to the prelates that if it is a victory for the health and security units, as after the 30th of April no COVID-19 infected patients were detected from society. The President further stated that with regard to Sri Lankans arriving in the country from overseas, a safety plan is underway according to the instructions of health authorities. The Advisory Council on Buddhist Religious Affairs discussed at length the education level in the school system and the Pirivan education system. The Mahasangha pointed out that certain periods of time there were steps taken to remove subjects such as history and literature from the curriculum. The President responded stated that in his manifesto he has given priority to education and initial plans on implementing a national education policy have already been initiated. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa said he will always pay attention to national security, and this is why from the post of Defence Secretary to all other related posts, competent individuals who have won his trust have been appointed by him. The President noted in this respect the intelligence units are extremely important and he has appointed the most suitable persons whilst vesting them with the required powers. The President said that he inquires into whether the tasks are carried out in a proper manner. President Rajapaksa observes that with regard to drug smuggling in the recent past, many raids were conducted. He says currently many steps have been taken regarding the use of narcotics in the country. President Rajapaksa observes that since narcotics have spread to various areas in the country, it is indeed a challenge. He notes that various persons are behind the drug trade. He added that if he has appointed suitable officers to address the process with a proper control.
Now, Director General of Health Services Consultant Dr. Anil Jasinger states that over 50,000 PCR tests have been conducted in the country, whilst the highest number of PCR tests to be conducted so far was reported yesterday. The number of COVID-19 positive cases undergoing hospitalized treatment currently stands at 416. Today, 17 newly infected persons were detected, out of which 15 of them are security force personnel. 10 of them had been undergoing quarantine at the Kandakadu Quarantine Center, whilst 5 of them were undergoing quarantine at the Mullathip Quarantine Center. The other 2 persons to test positive today were amongst those sent to Giragama Quarantine Center upon returning from Dubai. Yesterday, 13 COVID-19 positive persons were detected. 11 of them were security force personnel, whilst an individual undergoing quarantine upon arriving from Malaysia and an individual who arrived from Kuwait were amongst them. Director General of Health Services Consultant Dr. Anil Jasinger states yesterday was significant as 1,970 PCR tests were conducted, and this is the highest number of PCR tests to be conducted within a day. Dr. Jasinger further stated PCR testing was conducted on 316 individuals in society and 215 individuals at quarantine facilities yesterday. The number of fully recovered COVID-19 patients currently stands at 660. The number of fully recovered patients exceeds the number of patients undergoing treatment at hospitals. Full recoveries account for 60%, while the number of patients are 38%. The COVID-19 death rate is at a low figure of which is 0.82%. Business activities of the Beruala Fisheries Harbour, which remain closed, recommenced today. The Fisheries Harbour was closed down 2 months ago due to the rapid spread of COVID-19 in the Beruala area. A special health plan is in place for the safety of the fishermen and the customers arriving at the harbour. Persons who were displaced in the Western Province due to the imposition of curfew were transported to their villages under the 12th stage of the dispatching measure from the Sugatha Das Stadium today. Therefore, a group of 1,200 persons from the Colombo North Police Division were dispatched to their hometowns today.
The United States called on the World Health Organization yesterday to begin working immediately on investigating the source of the novel coronavirus as well as its handling of the response to the pandemic.
The United States is demanding that the World Health Organization begin work immediately on investigating both the source of the novel coronavirus and its handling of the response to the pandemic. Earlier this week, President Trump threatened in a tweeted letter to the WHO's Director General to permanently halt funding to the United Nations agency if it did not commit to reforms within 30 days and to reconsider his country's membership. Trump accuses the agency of being, quote, China-centric. On Friday, Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus defended their actions.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, WHO has worked day and night to coordinate the global response at all three levels of the organization.
More than 5.1 million cases of COVID-19 have been reported worldwide, with over 300,000 deaths. The virus emerged in the central Chinese city of Wuhan late last year.
Now moving on to the UK, people arriving in Britain after the 8th of June will have to self-isolate for 14 days or be fined. Britain's Interior Minister has stated, but questions remain about enforcement and damage to the economy.
Travellers arriving in Britain from overseas will have to self-isolate for 14 days and tell the authorities where they'll be staying. That's according to new rules set out by the government on Friday, as it seeks to prevent a second wave of infections. Here's Interior Minister Priti Patel.
International arrivals to self-isolate for 14 days. That is the incubation period of the virus, so that if people have become infected overseas, we can limit the spread of the virus at home.
The quarantine comes into effect on June 8th and includes returning Britons. Britain has carried out few checks on visitors during the outbreak, apart from arrivals from China early on. That's prompted accusations that Boris Johnson's government has been too lax, as well as slow to impose lockdown and behind many other countries on tracking and tracing. The latest plans look likely to draw more criticism. Airline bosses have warned such steps would further devastate their industry. And then there's the question of enforcement. Hong Kong has used government wristbands to keep track of those self-isolating, while in Greece, travellers are tested on arrival, then wait at a designated hotel until their results are ready. Spain has a 2-week quarantine in place, but hopes to lift it by the end of June. In Britain, those breaking the new rules will be fined £1,000, with health and border officials carrying out spot checks. Arrivals from Ireland will be exempt, as well as certain workers, such as road hauliers, medical professionals and fruit and veg pickers. Some lawmakers within Johnson's Conservative Party fear the quarantine will only compound the damage lockdown has wrought on the economy. Heathrow Airport wants Britain to bring in travel bubbles by exempting arrivals from low-risk countries. Australia, which has brought its own outbreak largely under control, is already lobbying for an exemption to the UK quarantine for its citizens.
South Korea is using mobile phone location data, credit card records and CCTV to function its speedy track and trace coronavirus response. But is the use of personal data an invasion of privacy?
In South Korea, streams of personal data are being used to fight the coronavirus. But that's proving controversial to those who may be as concerned about their privacy as they are their health. Using mobile phone location data, credit card records and CCTV, within an hour they're able to track and trace people who they think may be infected. The fast response is well ahead of almost every other country trying to contain the disease. The system was introduced in March, effectively removing barriers to sharing information between several authorities. It's built on the country's smart city data platform, designed to let local authorities share urban planning information on things like population, traffic and pollution. Yoon Do-ki is the director of the infectious disease management in Gyeonggi province.
We can receive GPS information from mobile service carriers and card usage records in about 20 to 30 minutes using the system. So the time needed for epidemiological investigation, which used to take around 2 to 3 days, has been relatively shortened, and it helps prevent the spread of infections.
The system got its first test with a fresh outbreak in May, traced to an area of the capital, Seoul, known for its nightlife. At least 196 people were infected in just this small hotspot.
We accessed all credit card usage records of the people who visited Itaewon clubs. Everyone on the visitors list are suspected infectees, so we investigated those specific people's card usage records. We also requested GPS information and received a full list of people who stayed in the relevant areas for over 1 hour during a specific time period.
Authorities' power to get hold of personal information was established by a new law 5 years ago. The Infectious Disease Prevention and Control Act was introduced after the country was hit by the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, known as MERS. It allows health officials in South Korea to access a wide range of personal data without a court order. Lee Jae-myung, the governor of the Gyeonggi province, says it's important such information is only used for health crises like the current pandemic.
There might be some parts of South Korea's contact tracing system that Western countries can't understand, but in our country almost everyone uses smartphones and the IT industries are highly advanced, so we can access records of every smartphone which has passed by a repeater in a certain area at some point. Actually, this is a very scary reality, and such information should only be used for crises like infectious diseases.
Many countries are scrambling to develop smartphone apps that can trace contacts of patients without revealing detailed personal information. South Korea has chosen a different path and a more invasive approach. Among people Reuters spoke to in a shopping mall here, there's an acceptance of the approach, but concerns about privacy too.
I think it's a violation of privacy to let everyone know where a confirmed patient lives, where they went and what they spent money on. I think it would be better if only the government knows that information.
Of course, protecting privacy is important, but I also think privacy should be put aside at this point, both nationally and globally. At a national or global level, lives are more important than personal privacy. Yes, personal privacy is important, but preventing an infectious disease is even more so.
With less than 300 deaths, South Korea's handling of the pandemic has left many countries reflecting on how much better they could have done themselves. But whether they would have been prepared or indeed able to use the same data capture methods is another matter altogether.
Now moving back into local stories, consultant pediatrician attached to the Lady Ridgeway Hospital for Children, Dr. Deepal Pereira, says if children under the age of 5 suffer from high fever lasting over 5 days, treatment needs to be sought urgently. He expressed these views commenting on the Kawasaki fever that is spreading these days. Consultant pediatrician Dr. Deepal Pereira says fever is a common sign of this condition, while the condition is frequently reported among children under the age of 5 years. Dr. Deepal Pereira notes that fever in this case does not go down when paracetamol is given and lasts for more than 5 days. He further explains that other signs that manifest are redness of eyes and lips, red patches on the body, including the palms and the soles of the feet, whilst a strawberry-like redness can appear on the lips. Dr. Pereira cautions that this condition can affect the heart and the arteries. Therefore, early detection and administering of treatment without delay is crucial in curing the condition, as delay in treatment could result in long-term adverse effects to the heart. Now, in the meantime, the Ministry of Buddha Sasana, Cultural and Religious Affairs calls on all devotees to engage in religious observances this Poson Full Moon Poi Day, the same manner in which they engage in religious observances to mark Vesak. The Prime Minister's office, issuing a release today, calls on devotees to engage in the observance of Sil and other religious rites from their homes itself on Poson Full Moon Poi Day, as the COVID-19 disease situation is being brought under control. The release issued by the Prime Minister's Media Division yesterday with regards to the Poson Festival needs to be in line with the guidelines mandated by the health units and the Ministry of Buddha Sasana. Media institutions will facilitate live coverage from religious sites at which special religious observances will take place to mark the Poson Full Moon Poi Day.
The plight of an animal known as Pakistan's loneliest elephant is set to come to an end after a court declared he should be freed from Islamabad Zoo, to the delight of his longtime champion pop icon Cher. The Jumbo arrived in Pakistan in 1985 as a 1-year-old, a gift to former President General Zia-ul Haq from the Sri Lankan government. Carvin, a 33-year-old Asian elephant from Sri Lanka, has been the focus of a 4-year campaign by Cher to secure his release from the Murgaza Zoo in Pakistan's capital after the singer saw pictures of the elephant living alone and held miserably in chains in a small enclosure with only a small dirty pond to play in. Outrage over the treatment of Carvin at the capital's Islamabad Zoo went global several years ago. On Thursday, Islamabad High Court ruled that Carvin should be freed and ordered wildlife officials to consult with Sri Lanka to find him a suitable sanctuary within 30 days. The court ordered the pain and suffering of Carvin must come to an end by relocating him to an appropriate elephant sanctuary in or outside the country, while criticizing the zoo for failing to meet the animal's needs for the past 3 decades. Arriving as a 1-year-old in 1985 from Sri Lanka, Carvin was temporarily held in chains in 2002 because zookeepers were concerned about increasingly violent tendencies, but he was freed later that year after an outcry. His mate, Saheli, who arrived also from Sri Lanka in 1990, died in 2012, and in 2015 it emerged that Carvin was regularly being changed once more for several hours a day. Activists said he had insufficient shelter from Islamabad's searing summer temperatures, which can rise to above 40 degrees Celsius. Carvin's 90 by 140 meter pen had almost no foliage and only limited shade was provided. Many people signed a petition sent to zoo authorities and Pakistan's then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in protest. A second petition, circulated in 2016, was backed by more than 200,000 animal lovers from across the globe demanding Carvin's release to a sanctuary. Pop star Cher, who for years has spoken out about his plight, tweeted her thanks to the Pakistani government, adding, "It's so emotional for us that I have to sit down." The news was met with triumph by Cher, who declared it to be one of the greatest moments of her life. Writing on Twitter, Cher said tears were rolling down her face at the decision. She thanked the Pakistani government.
Now, in more stories, Sri Lanka has been elected as the chair of the 7th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. The 7th APFSD was held under the theme Accelerating Action for and the Delivery of the 2030 Agenda in Asia and the Pacific. The 7th Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development was held on Wednesday in Bangkok, Thailand, was convened as a virtual meeting for the first time, complying with the new normal in the COVID-19 context. Sri Lanka's permanent representative to the United Nations Economic and Social Council for Asia and the Pacific, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Thailand, Samantha K. Jayasuriya, was elected by acclamation as the chair of the 7th APFSD and will serve for a period of 1 year. Recalling that the UN has declared a decade of action in realizing the 2030 Agenda, Ambassador Jayasuriya, addressing the opening session, underscored the importance of multi-stakeholder partnerships and well-coordinated response at national and regional levels, including with all institutions and all members of society, as well as from the multilateral cooperation framework in moving forward.
Moving from the Asia-Pacific Forum to Sudan, the United Nations mission in South Sudan recognized Sri Lanka Air Force Aviation Unit in South Sudan at a colorful medal ceremony recently. The UN medal awarding ceremony of the 4th contingent of Sri Lanka Aviation Unit, UNMES, in South Sudan was held last Wednesday at the Sri Lanka Aviation Unit hangar premises in BOR. During the ceremony, 19 officers and 85 other ranks received UN peacekeeping medals for UNMES. 3 officers and 17 other ranks were awarded with certificates for commendations by the force commander and the sector commander in appreciation of their valuable and meritorious services rendered to the UNMES. Brigadier General Mohammad Jahangir Alam, the sector commander, Sector East, graced the occasion as the chief guest. In addition, Ms. Deborah Session, head of Field Office of UN, and Mr. Liban Haji, Field Administrative Officer of the UN, also participated for the event as special guests of honor. The helicopter deployment is tasked to carry out VIP and troop transportation, transportation of food and equipment, domestic flying and medical evacuation in South Sudan in support of the overall UN mandate for that nation. Stay tuned, we have the international news after this short break.
Welcome back. We move on to international stories, and now in updates from the plane crash of yesterday, Pakistani authorities confirmed today that 97 people had died and 2 survived after the Pakistani International Airlines Airbus jet crashed into a crowded residential district in Karachi a day earlier. Today morning, residents expressed shock at the incident while police officers stood guard over a cordoned-off street leading to the site where flight PK-8303 came down at about 2:45 p.m. yesterday. At the crash site, soldiers and rescue workers have been working around the clock to extract bodies buried under the twisted fuselage and the rubble of multi-story buildings brought down by the crash. The crash happened on the eve of the Muslim Eid festival.
Brazil overtook Russia yesterday as the country with the second highest number of coronavirus infections worldwide, behind the United States, as the Americas emerged as a new epicenter of the pandemic. The South American country has now registered 330,890 infections and 21,048 deaths from the new coronavirus, though experts say undertesting means that the real figures may be 15 times higher or more. Brazil's death toll rose by 1,001 in 24 hours, the third time in 4 days it has come to over 1,000. The surge came as the World Health Organization declared South America as the new epicenter of the pandemic.
Now moving into news from the sporting arena, the International Cricket Council issued a set of guidelines on recommencing cricket matches as countries begin easing COVID-19 restrictions. Since the England team commenced training for the upcoming West Indies tour, the International Cricket Council took steps to issue a set of guidelines. This overall set of guidelines recommend that a chief medical officer be appointed for every team to assure the health and safety of the teams. The recommendations also include the holding of the quarantine training camp 14 days prior to a cricketing tour, at which COVID-19 testing and body temperature testing